Call the meeting to order. There's another agenda here. Okay, so we have a full board. Roll call. So approval of agenda. So the first thing I'd like to do is add an executive session. We have a request from Todd to do a reserve fund request. I'd like to add that into these right after the second public comment. Acceptable? Second. All in favor?
Aye.
So we will have an executive session. And then there was just a slight correction under the reminder for the RBTC reminder there. It's not that Lois needs an alternate for the March meeting. She wants people to start considering whether they would be
willing to take over after the March meeting, which will be April to.
Is there any other changes that anyone has? All right, with those changes, for a motion to approve the agenda.
Second.
All right, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? The agenda, now we're moving to approval of the minutes from the October 17th meeting.
Moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Minutes are approved. Now we move into student reports.
Okay. We have a request for you to speak up. Okay, so for those of you who don't know, the boys soccer team won the state championship this year. It was a really great game, and if you went, you know how hard they played, and they really deserved to win. And the student section was awesome too, and all the fans and everything. Also, basketball is starting up after Thanksgiving, and I know there's been a few open gyms and kids clinics that the basketball athletes are doing. But I know that they're excited for the season, and there's quite a few girls joining this year. So I know that like my friends are excited for more players on the team. So there's another blood drive as well that has been announced for December 10th. But instead of the gym, it will be in Mr. Garvin's back room. And the last blood drive was a success, and we hope to get more donations during the drive this time. There's also a spring musical, and that's going to be The Wizard of Oz. Unlike previous years, we're unfortunately not doing a live band. But students are still looking forward to the performance, and signups are already posted. Battle Physics just finished up on Tuesday with a competition that lasted all day long in the gym. The winning student team went up against the teachers in the final round and lost by like just a few points. And we spent about 3 weeks working on this project, planning and building and calibrating. And we were all really proud of how far we all came, especially the 7th graders. The play wrapped up last weekend with 2 showings. It was student-led and directed this year by 2 of our seniors. Lots of underclassmen joined the production this year, and everyone I know who worked on it was really happy with how it turned out. And this is, I think, the first student-led performance happening at Green Mountain that I've heard of. And Thanksgiving break begins next Wednesday, and a lot of students are looking forward to the break in their classes after working hard these past few months.
Thank you. Any questions for the students? All right, so we'll move into administrators' reports, starting with superintendent.
So I had sent out which is one of the documents that the Commission on Education Funding is taking a look at as they're trying to shape their ideas about how to change education funding in the state and bring down people's taxes. I'm going to go into a couple of the details about that report because I think it really foreshadows for us, based upon what they're looking at, is what they're going to be driving for when they eventually do make changes to the education funding formula. So we had talked about the 2 levers earlier on in the school year. And one of them was this idea of adjusting student to staff ratios. So the Pikers report refers to full-day preschool classrooms should be staffed at 1 teacher and 1 aide per 15 students. They do say that districts should have full-day preschools and full-day kindergartens, that having them for every dollar that's invested in students in those programs, it saves $18 per student down the line. Core classes, which are English, math, social studies, science, should be capped at 15 students in grades K to 3 and 25 in grades 4 through 12. They also stated, and this goes to the other lever, the idea of forced consolidations of smaller schools. The FICA study says that there's a strong correlation between school size and student performance and cost effectiveness. And they're saying the ideal size for elementary schools is 400 to 600 students. And the ideal size for secondary schools is 500 to 1,000. They also talked a little bit about the condition of school buildings and whether it had an impact on student performance. The research was kind of unclear. There are some studies that said it did, some studies that said it didn't. There was a recommendation that came out of the actual committee itself, because they're supposed to have a preliminary draft to the legislators in December of this year, even though the final one's not due till next year. And one of the things that they said was that the state has got to stop using the education fund for things other than education. So you got the money that goes in there. They took a big chunk out of it for universal free meals. They took a chunk out of it to cover teacher retirements because they didn't properly fund the teachers' funds. And they're taking a huge chunk out of it to pay for tuition to private schools. And so one of the recommendations of the commission is that has to stop. If that money is not being taken out, then everybody's taxes would go down. They also recommended that the money that goes into the educational fund must come from different sources besides just property taxes. They did not go into detail about, the other possible sources, but property taxes, they said having it all come from there is just too much. And just so people kind of know where things may be headed, the regional superintendents are going to have their meeting tomorrow, and one of the topics that we are going to be discussing to potentially try to get ahead of the curve in case it happens is regional school at the county level, because that's one of the discussions that's coming out of the commission. So just have folks kind of reflect on that a little bit. Doesn't mean it's going to happen, but it's been a rich topic of discussion, enough so that we want to start to think about it a little bit just in case. In terms of negotiations, the teachers are ready to go with us on December 4th. That's going to be our first meeting. It'll be by Zoom. And it's really a quick meeting. It's establishing the ground rules for the negotiation sessions and the future meeting dates. The Green Mountain Union support staff contract has 1 more year, so we don't need to worry about the support staff on this side. I think that's about it.
Any questions for Lane?
Some quick things. Do we have a time for that meeting on the 4th?
That will be 6 p.m. It'll be Zoom.
6 p.m.
Yeah,
Okay.
so we'll be sending a Zoom link out.
Okay. And then the other, just about the, is it the PICA's report?
Yep.
Did they include anything about teacher evaluations or kind of teacher ratings or anything in there? The reason I ask is just because in education research, it shows up over and over again that more than class size, more than school size, more than curriculum itself, that it's the teachers that matter and make a big difference. So is there any way to quantify that?
Those pieces, I don't recall too much discussion about, but that doesn't mean it's not there.
Okay.
I did a fairly high level read through, and then I've been going through looking in the detail of the specifics because they're a little bit deep and there's a lot of them. So what I'll do is each time that we come to these meetings, I'll bring in some more specifics I'm pulling out of there. I can say from experience though that I concur with you, and we have a little bit of data that we collected at OSSD on it. There was an incredibly strong correlation between the student performance and the number of days that teachers were absent on average. So that indicates pretty strongly that kids in front of the teacher makes a huge difference, right? The schools that had the lowest or the best attendance in terms of the teachers had the highest performance. And it was almost a 1-to-1 correlation. Okay, so good point.
to principal reports. Everybody read there, I'm assuming read your. Is there anything that you guys have to add to reports? Any questions for the principals?
Really, I just, again, wanted to point out, certainly from Green Mountain, I've added pertinent information at the top of the report there, just to keep you informed of
John, I can't hear you.
enrollment. Sorry.
I can't hear you. I
Oh,
can't.
Oh,
I
okay,
can't
sorry. I'm reading here. I've included pertinent information, keep you informed in enrollment, RVTC enrollment, IEPs, 504s, and my internal goals is monitoring attendance, the average attendance over the year. And a lot of the students have covered a lot of area around stuff that is going on. We did get a welcome thanks from Warm Hands and Warm Hearts. Our students were really great at providing for the hats, coats, etc. for donation, and they were very pleased. The ski program is filling up slowly. It's very positive this year. A lot of kids are seemingly going to take advantage of it. That's on our Tuesday skis in January and February. And as the kids said, we wrapped up with our battle physics program on Tuesday, where we had many teams all working on the math, working on the science, trying to hit the targets. The teachers in the end just beat the winners marginally, but they were way more experienced. But being there, the kids had a great experience all day and really participated.
You have my report and it's pretty self-explanatory. The only thing I just wanted to highlight was student-led conferences. We did something a little different this year and we paired our family engagement event with student-led conferences this year, which turned out to be a great thing. So we had family engagement night going on in the gym all afternoon and into the evening while conferences were going on. And so it had this really sort of positive, open housey vibe at the school, and it was great to see so many families smiling and going through the gym and seeing all the booths that were available at the family engagement event before and after their conferences. And so it seems like something that we might do again moving forward. Unless you have questions, I don't really have anything else to add.
Thank you. Is there any updates for CTS?
Oh, yeah, we've got a new principal on the way. In Cavendish Town Elementary School. Sorry about that. I was thinking about budget. Who is actually here tonight. We'll introduce her when we get to that part of the agenda. But the start date potentially, if approved by the board, would be December 1st. And that'll give us some time. And she's already been working with the team to figure out the best way to transition the curriculum work off, so that it continues through this year and strengthens and accelerates next year. So I think it'll be a little bit of a time, and I know the staff there have really kind of stepped up, and they've been under a little bit of stress because of it. But I think things are about to have a major change for the better in a very short amount of time. Yeah.
Any questions for the principals? Okay. Curriculum reports?
I would just send a share request.
I see it. Your iPhone?
I think I so as promised, last month I had said that we had finished our benchmark assessments and would report on some of the data from the TRSU level regarding that. So you, on the website, there is the written report that was shared in TRSU. And so this presentation is related to the information on that report. So if you click on the link that's live on the TRSU website, you can view the report and the images. So most of this is the SIP, our continuous improvement goals that we're working on throughout the next 2 years. So this was, they were adopted by the board in May of this past year, 2024. And so in this presentation, I'm going to be really focusing on what we call satellite data. Julie and I spoke about this last year quite extensively about this kind of data is district and building level achievement scores that point us in a focused direction. So BTCAP, or Vermont Common Assessment Program data, which is what the state utilizes, is one of those, as well as MAP data, which is taking a closer look at learning trends. So we use what we call NEWA and IXL, which are two assessments internally to measure and kind of get down into specific focus direction that point to student understanding, so we can focus on instructional gaps so teachers can work collaboratively to close those. So in that case, I just wanted to share that there are two assessments that I'm going to be talking about, which is one is a criterion referenced assessment, which is the Vermont Common Assessment Program. So that's measuring a set of standards, a criteria against a set of standards. So that's Common Core state standards or the NGSS standards for science. And then NORB referenced assessments compare a student's performance to that of their peers across the country taking that test. So that is both IXL. IXL is a norm referenced and criterion referenced assessment. NWEA is norm referenced. So it's important to understand that as we look at the data. So this is the fall benchmark data analysis. I'm going to skip the slides. I can share that already. So math performance. So on this chart shows aggregate projected growth. So the yellow diamond versus observed growth, which is the bar graph in Two Rivers. So essentially, you notice that in 4th and 5th grade, we went above the growth, our 4th and 5th graders, compared to the observed growth, the projected growth of that grade level. 6th grade met, where we were a little below, is in 1st, 2nd, and 3rd grade. And this is comparing fall 2023 data to fall 2024 data. So you're looking at kindergartners in last fall to 1st grade this year. The reading performance data, similarly, shows aggregate projected growth for our 1st through 6th grade. You can see 3rd and 3rd grade was met it, and 4th and 5th grade were surpassed it, where 1st and 2nd and 6th were a little below. Math performance for 7-12, we utilize a different measure for IXL, and I think it's important to acknowledge that Green Mountain is in the 2nd year of utilizing a screener tool such as IXL, diagnostic tool. So what this snapshot says is essentially the IXL diagnostic is a national norm for K-12 to provide educators with additional information on the context of the student's performance compared to their peers. So here it shows that we have 20% are above the national average, and we have a certain percentage, actually, exact number. So 20% of students are above the national average. 64% of our students that were about to take this were not pinpointed. So I know Kate and John and the leadership team have been working really hard to try and figure out why and determine how we can best support to get that data. So that's what you see there for math. ELA performance. This tool, math was first introduced at the beginning of last year. ELA was introduced at the end of last year. So in ELA, 10% of students are above the national average, and 71% of students' proficiency is not pinpointed. So the key takeaways, next steps. It kind of reiterates what I had already said about grades 4 and 5. Reading and math performance exceeded growth. In K6, the average math percentile dropped from 53rd percentile in the fall of 2023 to the 46th percentile, signaling a slight decline in proficiency, and similarly, reading proficiency declined from the 58th to the 51st percentile. So it's just something that we're watching and thinking about and tracking as we go into winter benchmark. And similarly, the grade 7 through 12, that's information that I had just shared about that key takeaways from when we were looking at the data. So next steps, I would like to highlight that in the PICUS report that Lane mentioned, on pages 9 and 10, there are 10 school improvement strategies, and we are actually utilizing many of those already articulated on them. And you'll notice here, I pulled out a few. Focusing on the early grade interventions, our schools are really targeting part of looking at how progress monitoring student interventions and shifting those for students in, for ELA and for math. Thinking about enhancing our data collection and assessment, in particular at GM, and also with different types of assessments in our elementary schools. Looking at curriculum alignment, so already taken a stab at looking at how we're aligning our scope and sequence K through 12 to ensure that we don't have any gaps in what we're teaching, and targeted interventions and support, as well as continuing monitoring and adjustments. In both of those in particular, we're working with the AOE with a SPDIG SSIP grant that we've mentioned before. They are working really strategically here at GM, but also we're pushing out into the elementary schools as well for math support and coaching for teachers during our in-service days. Lastly, the district and school-based leadership teams are really doing a wonderful job kind of meeting to look at the data and think what are the next steps in order to really discern why the gaps and what do they need to do to change. The last piece that I wanted to share is that the Vermont Common Assessment Program, which is the BTCAP assessment. As you know, this is we'll be going into the 3rd year. The tests are still embargoed for public consumption, but I wanted to share with you this report that the AOE produced in September with statewide assessment results. You can link to it. It was, it's on their website, and just wanted to share just the state averages. They're anticipating them being lifted in the winter. And so the average proficiency remains steady compared to previous years throughout the state, with the highest in ELA, 45 to 58%, followed by science, and then math, 30 to 47%. So they continue to show significant gaps for students with historically marginalized background and peers across the state. And they, again, will be making the specific school-based and district-based results available to the public in the winter. And again, these are criterion reference tests that are focusing on students' performance related to Common Core standards in English language arts and math and the NGSS. Questions?
I actually have a couple of slides back. It started to explain it, but can you explain why like 60 and 70% of the students weren't defined?
Yeah.
Well, actually, I would love to have John talk about that too. But one of the thoughts is they're not spending enough time being pinpointed in a certain range. So we want to talk more about
a lot of students don't necessarily take it seriously, and they're guessing some of the answers to either math or ELA, and where you guess whether you get it right or wrong, whether you know it or whether you don't know it. The whole idea of Excel is to pinpointing is okay. They vary the questions from harder to then once you've answered it, they make it easier if you got it wrong, and it keeps going back and forth to eventually pinpoint you. So they're not actually pinpointed, even though they're doing the assessment. So our leadership team are looking at, we feel that we need a little bit more training, and Julie's been searching for us to get that very quickly. And then once we have our teachers better understanding it and get working with kids to explain it better, the hope is that we'll find a time within the classroom that we can administer it as well, and it will make more sense and get more accurate information. So,
One of the other things I was going to add is that I know the leadership team has talked about thinking, like, is it the time that they're taking it, like during the day, and when they're taking it? So these other questions that think about, like structurally, what could we change to help support the students in function?
How long does the test take?
It depends on each student. Actually, Julie, do you remember how long it takes per student?
It depends on how, so it's accumulated data over time. So if a student hasn't really engaged, it could take as much as 45 minutes, but the expectation is not to do it in one sitting. If you've been actively working on it on a regular basis, 10 questions a week will keep you pinpointed and reflect new stuff that you learn going to class or practicing skills. I mean, the tool is most useful, and some of the elementary schools have really cracked the nut of making it a weekly routine, 10, 15, 20 questions a week. It's just what kids are expected to do in the diagnostic arena, and they're getting pinpointed regularly, not just at benchmark time. Most importantly, that also produces kid-specific action plans that teachers can then use to help decide how to support the student. I think that's part of the solution, is when teachers have, for the students that teachers have data for, if they're using that data with those students, then that will help sort of maybe motivate other students to see the benefits of getting that same targeted help.
Thank you. Thank you for those answers.
Can I ask a question? This is,
Not right now.
Oh.
not- Wait, you can ask a question during public comment.
okay, thank you.
Does anyone else on the board have questions?
How do we know that they're guessing?
I mean, that's kind of hard to say, Scott. I think what we do have data about is how many questions they're attempting and over what period of time. So if I look at the data and I see that you answered 20 questions in 5 minutes, that's a pretty good indication you're guessing, because you don't even have time to read the question in that time. That's probably our best measure, because these particular ones, we don't, unlike the skills practice where we can see the actual question and how the student answered it and help them in that particular case, the diagnostics, you just see how many they tried and how many they were able to answer.
Is there a range of deviation with this IXL, like the 60%, 70% that we're seeing? Is that normal, abnormal for the program?
I mean, I don't have data, we don't have data to compare specifically to other schools, but what that 50% is, all of the people across, all of the districts across the country that use this tool, 50% is the median for everyone. And so our students, we would hope to see at least 50% of our students above that because it's a median, but we're not seeing that high a percentage. So that's kind of the comparison. And a lot of the numbers are skewed because of that large grade bar. that
Well, that's
we
what I
just
mean,
don't-
that large grade bar that's not being pinpointed at all. Is that normal with IXL? Is that a product program, or is that just utilization?
I'm thinking it might be normal for people in their infancy, but it's certainly not what we're seeing in the elementary schools right now. But that's a different grade band too. I mean, we can go back to our IXL contacts and see if they can share anything about that. I think the training that John's trying to pursue, the training we did last year, they recommend some engagement strategies that are intended to address that very problem.
Any other board questions? Is there anything more? Is that? All right, now we'll move into the Territory Facilities Director's report.
Good evening, everybody. Before I get going with the facilities, I want to echo what Lexi said. The boys obviously won the state championship. It was a great turnout at Rutland. Thank you for everybody that came. Stowe was won forever, but not this year. It was a great community support. There were a lot of people there, and it was really nice to see a huge turnout. We like to talk about our successes as a school. In the past 8 years, this school has won 7 state championships in various sports. not all in soccer, we won a couple in soccer, 3 or 4 in track, and 1 in basketball. So we've had some great success here with our athletics. Also, I need to mention, our boys coach, Jake Walker, was the SDL Soccer Coach of the Year. We've had multiple coaches win that. We've never had one win that I know of, the state coach of the year. So Jake was nominated and voted as the state soccer coach of the year. So some great accolades for our soccer program and our school. Okay, and I do want to thank our town managers from Ludlow, Cavendish, and Chester, because after the boys won, the Ludlow Fire Department, the Proctorsville Fire Department, Chester Fire Department escorted the bus all the way from Ludlow, all the way to Chester. It was a great show. I hope everybody got to come out and see it. They didn't, I'm sure they heard, because there were a lot of sirens and a lot of. Then it was a great turnout. We had a lot of people up here at the school, so thank you to everybody for that. All right, on the facilities, first PCBs, we're waiting for the Department of Environmental Conservation to approve a new work plan for another round of indoor air quality testing, and they're gonna do some more source testing, which I called and didn't get an answer, but I did talk to our environmentalists. They want to make sure that we don't go through what Newport did, because we're moving. Green Mountain is now at the top of the list. Newport went to a program of encapsulating what they had for problems. For anybody, I think we had talked about it, where Newport was not able to get their kids in school on time. They did a window project that we were going to start here. Thank God we didn't. So they're going to do some more testing here, and we'll see where that goes. Some tile and some paint, and that hasn't been approved yet, but that's coming soon. But we are at the top of the list now. Newport has moved off the top of the list as far as funding goes. Where it's going to come from, how much it's going to be, nobody's quite sure yet, but Green Mountain is the top topic of conversation now. Chester Andover, things are going along pretty good, which it should. We've put the most money into that school in the past couple of years, so things are going along well there. Cavendish and Green Mountain, we're having some minor to major repairs that need to be done, and not that we want to do them, it's do them or not operate. So at the high school, I just want to report that we've done a couple of fairly decent sized jobs that we've absorbed in the maintenance budget, but I won't be able to absorb very many more of those without going over. So it may be coming to the board, and we may have to tap into our capital improvement projects from that. They're fairly decent size, and again, they're not projects that were like, well, let's do some preventative maintenance. These are things that were down and we couldn't go without them. So they were not extremely expensive, but expensive enough to take a big bite out of my maintenance budget here at high school. So we're not in trouble yet, but just give the board a heads up that I may have to come to you and say, okay, we need to do X job, and doesn't seem like that much money would be the deficit out of the budget or take it out of capital improvement. And then we're gonna go into executive session at some point. I don't remember when, and we'll have another little project to talk about. Any questions? Question? Awesome. Thank you.
And moving to the financial updates.
Right, you have October's financial in the folder, as well as a little write-up I did. 2 things I want to point out that we're over budget on. One is the property insurance. And that has to do with the flood insurance, the way that they changed it. Our insurance had to get a reinsurance because they wouldn't cover us for enough money, the initial provider that we had. So they have an additional insurance through the National Flood Insurance, and that costs us quite a bit of money. I've asked for a credit back because we have taken the White House off property, and so we shouldn't have to be paying for it. So I've got to follow up on that, see if we get the credit. The other one that's over budget, but we had somewhat planned for this, was a lease payment. I think you approved in August, a new lease agreement, and the intention was to pay with that with sale of some what is it, Julie, outdated, or what is the word I want to use? The equipment that we got rid of.
Sorry, say again, Cheryl.
The equipment that we got rid of. It's
Yeah, they
outdated.
were the iPads that we refurbished over the
Yeah.
summer.
And so
we
it's
sold
kind of a
them.
buyback thing that we have, and so we'll more than enough pay for that overtime lease payment with what we had intended. The other update I have is that I have drafts of all the audits back. I've been through them once, so hopefully in December I'll be reporting back to you all. Any questions on the financials? I think bonds next in the budget. I don't have any information.
But yeah, the bond piece, actually, Todd and I talked this week after he got back from his vacation and looked rested at least for a day or two. The big concern is we don't know what the future holds with ed funding. And so there's a lot of work that needs to happen across the district. There's some that's critical, and there's some that's desirable. And so the question is, and this is kind of a question for discussion with the board, is where do we fall if we go out to pursue another bond, knowing that schools could be shuffled around, could be consolidated? I think for me, the biggest concern right now is the boiler at the high school. And Todd, if he wants to, can talk a little bit about, why that's a concern in the state that it's in, because that's one of those systems that, we're in wintertime right now. If that fails, and the temperatures start to drop in this building, you got two problems. You can't have the kids here if the temperature gets too low, and then you got to worry about all the water pipes freezing. So
one of the big bills I just talked about was our oldest boiler. It's the second time we've had to do one of these sections in that boiler. We hope that we did enough preventative maintenance on it this time. I had to break the whole thing apart and try to avoid this problem again, but there's no guarantee because of how old it is. I reported to you guys that, Mount Holly put in a small propane condensing boiler. The thing's unbelievable. I mean, the thing's only running at 30 degrees, it's running at 20% to maintain the temperature at that school. Where our boilers, with the oil fired the way we are right now, they're either on or they're off. They're on low fire or high fire. We actually have one, and we haven't found anybody that can get it to run on low fire. So, I mean, that would be a project that I would say is worthy of either we try to go out to bond or put it in the budget. And we have a couple matrix, I'm meeting with the EI team tomorrow, and just to get a rough budgetary number for you guys about redoing the boiler room. And see where that stands. Just to be proactive in case the board said, let's discuss that. We have some kind of idea how much money that's going to cost. There are some grant programs out there and some low interest loans that if we incorporated a lighting project into one of the two elementary schools, we probably would be qualified for that as well. So, definitely the pumps and the boilers at the high school would be a great project to do.
And the idea was to switch it over to propane as
To
well.
go to propane.
And they're already seeing savings at Ludlow Mount Holly just because of the change from oil to propane. Not even being able to measure the efficiency improvements that we're going to see. So, this is one of those projects where there'll be some upfront cost to it. But by the same token, it'll improve efficiency quite a bit. And so there's going to be some savings too. So hopefully there's quite a bit of balancing out between the expense and the savings that we get from it. But I would say that that's probably the most critical one to consider, given an uncertainty about, what the commission is going to come back with. They also seem to be ramping up their timeline. I was saying 5 to 10, it's closer to 3 to 5 years. So folks were
For execution of whatever plan they produce.
That's it for your bond discussion?
Yep.
Any questions about that?
Yes.
You do?
No, sorry.
All right.
Budget?
Yeah.
So we have put together a budget. I will say this is preliminary. A lot of information that we don't have. In addition to supervisory, we presented the budget, and we also discussed that we were looking into adding some additional programs to bring some of our students back to the district to save some money, so we still have to look at that. So We also don't have the December 1st information. Concerned with the December information of if it's going to change again, because that was part of the problem last year. But it'll at least give us a path to travel down to start with. So Lane is going to present to you what we really come up with.
And Cheryl's going to correct me on all the things I get wrong along the way. I tried to, because, you know, we've got the restructuring discussion a little bit later. I tried to actually shorten this up quite a bit to save time. Hopefully I didn't shorten it too much, but again, it's a broad overview. This budget, it represents everything folks asked for. So there was no, you know, cutting this or cutting that. It's the idea is that, you know, in terms of trying to reach the goals that the district has for the students and for the school district, this is what folks are saying they need. So let me see if I get this working.
When you say folks, you mean like the administration and teachers?
Yep, the people we talk to
Not
about
like
what they need to pull it off. Yep, you've got it. So usually I start off these discussions with this idea of, you know, what's the current financial landscape across the state of Vermont? And I think folks are familiar with what that is because it gives us an indication to the challenges that we may have in terms of passing a budget. And to try to keep these things in mind as we're developing, you know, the final budget that we will eventually send out for a vote. I don't think it's far from people's minds last year's historic tax increases that happened. And so those are going to be on the voters' minds. One of the things that we've been trying to do is have the discussion about the idea of how the education funding in Vermont works, that even though this district did significant cuts to try to bring down people's taxes, your taxes still went up. And the reason is because we pay for everybody's education around the state, and everybody pays for us. So even though ours went down, if other districts around the state raised what their expenses were, what they were asking for, we end up paying for that. So our taxes went up anyway. Yep.
Can I ask about that quickly? Because although from the first budget to the budget that actually passed, there were significant cuts, it was still a big increase over the previous year's budget.
Yep.
So my understanding of the reason that our taxes didn't go up more than they did is because of the change in how students were counted. And that the reason that we were able to have a budget that was as large a percentage increase over the previous year's budget as it was and not have our taxes go up more than it was because of that recounting, and that wouldn't be true in the coming year.
And we'll talk about that on two.
Okay.
So what ended up happening last year is the state changed the ed funding formula in terms of what they call the basic education amount that they give for students. And basically all it did was it took the amount of money from the previous year and it rearranged who was receiving it. So obviously, if through that weighting system we got a benefit, we accepted the money whether we needed it or not. But that meant that there was another school district or other districts around the state that now was getting less than they needed to be able to run their schools. And so they had to raise their budget significantly to compensate for that. And we all paid for it. So that was one of the big reasons for the increase last year, was because of those school districts that had to make up for the loss because of how the money got redistributed. The second piece was because of the historic rise in housing prices. And again, that's not within the control of the district, but the reality is the value of people's properties, went up anywhere from 50 to 100% over the last couple of years. And the state expects you to pay property taxes on that gain in value. And so that was the other piece. But the important thing to walk away from this little conversation with is the idea that what we do locally does not have much of an impact on our local taxes at all. It's what collectively all the districts across the state do at the same time. For this year, there was a statement that came out towards the end of the summer that even if every district across the state level funded, there would still be a predicted 7% increase in taxes this year. So this is kind of our starting point. We also have the unknowns of a new federal administration who has stated that they want to cut the education department, and has also talked about, potentially cutting back on the grants. The title grants that districts get can range anywhere from a couple of $100,000 to over $1 million, and that loss across the state would have to be made up somehow because the schools depend upon that. And then we also have this uncertainty that's out there about what the outcome of the Education Funding Committee work is going to be. And it makes things uncertain in a lot of ways. It's like we're having a discussion about the boilers. Where should we be putting our money into right now and where should we not? Because they don't have a clear picture for us. And the last thing we'd want to do is put, 5, 10, 15, 20 million into something and turn around in 2 or 3 years when the commission gets done its work and find out that it was all for naught. And so that's a concern on people's minds, especially us that are working on the budgets. I don't know if you want questions or as we go through. Are you okay with?
If you're okay with people asking, that's fine. If not, we can put the end, whatever your train of thought gets thrown much.
Yeah, so I've split up the changes in terms of the budget from last year to this year. So what you're going to see in these couple of slides is what's changed from last year to this year. And it's in 3 different categories. There's increase in expenses that are discretionary. In other words, these are things that we should do for the most part if we want to achieve the district's goals in terms of student achievement and outcomes, but we don't have to do them, right? So it's discretionary. We've got a choice here. We also have things that are mandatory, and you'll see that on the next slide. We've already entered into agreements with the unions about what salary increases are going to be from year to year, and so we're obligated to pay those. Special education expenses we are obligated to pay, utilities, all those things that change from year to year, we have obligations, so it's mandated. We don't really have a choice. So what we're looking for, and John, you can jump in a little bit too, especially on the second one, if I'm calling it wrong, is at Green Mountain Union High School, we're looking at adding 1.5 full-time equivalents, so 1.5 teachers in math. One as a teacher to be able to make sure that we are able to offer the higher level math classes every year instead of every other year. And then a 0.5 as a math interventionist. One of the reasons that the scores tend to be low in Vermont is because as students go up through the ranks, they have holes in their education. And one of the ways to fill those holes for students that are in the pipeline is to have an interventionist come in, take a look and analyze what's weak, what's missing, and provide that instruction. So those are kind of important in terms of reaching our goals. $84,000 for Green Mountain Union High School for a full-time person for wellness and for home to school. And so I believe the wellness piece is us taking over a grant that was retrieved from the Rowland Foundation, which has allowed us to provide healthcare within the high school to students directly here on the campus. We're looking for $22,000 to increase custodial at Cavendish, at Chester, Chester Andover. My brain's always on Cavendish because we're in Andover so much. $162,000 if we build the preschool program for staff at Cavendish that we're talking about in the restructuring.
So that would be Cavendish Town
No,
Elementary School?
sorry about that. Yep.
But it would be a district.
It's a district preschool. So we'll talk about that when we get to the other. So this is for the Green Mountain Union School District's preschool. So this is for 2 staff members. One is a teacher, one would be a paraprofessional. And also $40,000 in one-time setup costs to make sure that we're in compliance with the state regulations and buying playground equipment for the little kids because they need something a little different than the elementary and the older students use. We're looking for $45,000 for a bus driver. This is to ensure that we always have a sub available in case one of our bus drivers calls out sick, to hopefully improve our ability to have some consistency in transportation for students. That is probably the biggest complaint that I have heard from parents in my time here is that lack of consistency in transportation. $19,000 for curriculum resources from Open Up, which is a publisher that usually provides resources, and Emma can correct me if I'm wrong, for teachers. $8,000 for curriculum resources for foundations and everyday math. $25,000 to replace our driver's education vehicle, which is getting up there in age and likely will not pass inspection. $5,000 for half the cost of a trailer. They will be raising the other half. For the mountain biking club, $7,000 for Green Mountain High School to buy a kiln for the art program. And $2,000 to continue with the ruler program that we use for social emotional learning. So the total amount in discretionary is $571,000. So, yep.
Can you explain more of that second budget item, the wellness, home to school, and providing care at school?
Yeah, John, do you feel like you got more specifics than I do?
I guess, great. Right up on it. So we'll see if I can just go through what I had to do was Jess has been involved in, as Superintendent said, the Roland Foundation, and now that we have the wellness room up and running, and it's done a lot by volunteers around the guidance department, etc. They're all spending a little bit of time, and we just want to continue to increase that. We're seeking a candidate to fill student engagement and wellness as a student engagement and wellness director. Professional will work in collaboration with the guidance office staff to reduce barriers to educational access. Working out of a newly created room, person identify and engage students in the need through day-to-day management of the wellness center. Will assist school staff with attendance and other school-related problems, and act as a community advocate, fulfilling a liaison function among students, parents, school community, and social services agencies. The person will consistently work to build trusting relationships with families who have historically struggled to feel safe and effectively engaging in public schools. The person will provide a link between the MUHS, teachers, students, parents, community organizations regarding establishing resources, programs, services, and activities. Appropriate individual will have initiative and motivational skills, as well as the knowledge and familiarity with community as resources, solicitations, and its populations. Part of the position will be running and managing student use of the Wellness Center, being a presence in this busy space will allow the individual natural opportunities to connect with all of our students, as well as those who are in highest need. They'll greet and check students in when they arrive, help students identify appropriate coping skills for managing emotions, briefly process issues, and identify needs that are beyond the scope of the wellness space. The staff person will direct students to additional supports that may be in the school or the community, collaborate with school and community professionals, and make referrals when appropriate. In the wellness coordinator role, the person will manage student use of the wellness space during the busiest part of the day. They'll greet and check in students when they arrive, help students identify appropriate coping skills. The ideal candidate will have demonstrated ability to engage students and families, working knowledge, available area, services, resources, experience working with children and families. So again, it's someone that it's kind of a multi-role where they're going to do a lot of being in charge and organizing, working with kids, working with families, assisting families in just about everything.
So is this funding a new position that doesn't exist currently?
Yes, yeah,
Okay.
yes. That's a new, totally new thing. So in the first year of Jess's grant, they did a lot of research and looking at different programs, visiting other schools that have programs in operation to give us some ideas on how well we can develop ours to make it the best that there is. And now we're in a position where it's open and it's managed as long as we can volunteer it. And students are aware of that, and we want to increase the ability the ability for students with need to.
And again, everything on here is, this is just what people ask for.
I didn't understand what that position was. I'm not totally clear still on what the wellness room is entirely.
I can be happy to give people a tour later. It's
Sure.
pretty much set up, so if you're available after the meeting, or any time, please come in and see it in action, ask questions. But again, tonight, anyway, sure.
Question. In all of our kind of health and wellness space, right? Like there's seems like there's a pediatrician that's coming and a dentist that's coming and therapists that work here. Are we billing insurances? Are we taking advantage of all of the opportunities to get reimbursed for the services that we provide outside of just the budget? Or
Yes.
is everything coming just through
Yes.
the budget?
So the hygienist is being paid through the MAC grant. I can't tell you what that stands for, but so that's totally paid for that. Through Medicaid IEP, services that are provided are billed with the parents' permission for it. So not all of them, some.
More questions about this?
So the expenses that are mandatory, health insurance, yeah, there's actually symbolism in those. I'll give you a good kudos if you can figure out what they are. But the health insurance goes up every year. I believe this year is what, 11.9% that it's going up as part of the benefits that we provide to the staff. So for Green Mountain, you're looking at an increase of $232,000 due to the increase in the cost of benefits. $20,000 for an increase in the dental plan. $153,000 for the mandatory contractual obligation in terms of support staff salaries, and the increase in the cost of retirement and workers' compensation insurance. $24,000 to ensure that we're doing proper maintenance and repairs, because the cost of those things go up as well. The big one is the special education assessment coming from TRSU. That's $473,000 to provide the federally mandated services to our special education students. $151,000 in the central office assessment, which is actually larger than it looks. We'll talk about that when we get to the savings page. It was due to moving an individual from one line item to another to put them appropriately where they should go. And you'll see what that means in just a second. $10,000, which you've already mentioned in terms of property insurance, $22,000 for homeless transportation. We have to estimate right now where we think negotiations with the teachers union is going to land. So we're putting aside $172,000 for that, and then an additional $6,000 to subsidize the cost of food services. So the total mandatory, so this is stuff that we have to provide, is $1.2 million. Questions or? Nobody's crying. Usually a good sign.
Food services subsidy, don't we have, I think you talked about earlier about the universal free lunches. What is the subsidy from our line?
It's above and beyond what we get on reimbursement. We have to pay.
All right.
So savings, which affects the other amounts, a $6,000 reduction due to, I don't, is it a permanent reduction in? Yeah.
Because we put that to a 25
That's right.
position. This is the Chester Ingram summer maintenance help.
We have 45,000 that's in the current budget that was scheduled for painting at Cavendish. That painting was done. We can now take that one out. $46,000 because we're at the end of the computer lease, a reduction of another $46,000 because of a decrease in the technology assessment, a decrease of $83,000, which would be a reduction that we would see because of building the preschool. Students coming here instead of having to pay tuition. $71,000 reduction for Cavendish because the bond for, we believe the roof is now paid in full. So that's money that we usually budget for that we don't have. And I'll fix my typo.
My old eyes. Would you mind just going back real quick one more? I just wanted the preschool number since we put that one out.
Oh, I can send this around.
Okay, that'd be great.
We put it up on the website.
All right, thank you.
Yeah, so you got, this is the total amount to get it in place, but it's reduced by that 83,000. So total change in expenses for Green Mountain Union, you got your discretionary, you've got your mandatory, you've got the savings that we can take off the top, and so you're looking at a total of 1.5 million, with no adjustments done to what people are asking. Surplus and revenues, there's 1.2 million in surplus at the end of the last budget cycle. 500,000 of it was rolled into this current budget that we're living in now to subsidize taxes, which is a good thing, but it can cause a problem because if we don't subsidize it again, we have to come up with that 500,000 from somewhere else. So there will be a cliff here at some point in time. This leaves 773,000 remaining in the surplus. And so the board at some point in time will have to decide what to do with that. One of the things you could do is roll it over to subsidize next year's budget, right? So you don't hit that cliff from the 500,000. You could vote to put it into a reserve fund for, needed emergency repairs that may come up in the future, or you could do a combination. Some in to subsidize next year's taxes to bring the burden down for taxpayers a little bit, and then to also have that reserve from there.
But at some point, we still have a cliff. Everything has to be running out of reserve.
Does that actually save the taxpayers based on state education funding formula?
Right.
Not
Consistently,
a
the
little.
answer's
So
Yeah.
been, we can do whatever we
Couple
want.
pennies
The state's
per
still
100.
taking it out.
Yeah.
they see that we have it, are we penalized?
For having the,
Currently, no.
they've talked about recapturing reserve funds that schools have. I talked with legal counsel at that time, and my understanding from them was that money that you already have, they cannot touch because people voted to put it there. But going forward, they could take your surpluses at the end of the year and things like that. So just something to be aware of. I haven't heard much discussion about that in the last year. So.
Could some of this be applied to what is down in the discretionary budget?
Budget overall? It's a good question. That's pretty much it for the budget piece. Unless folks have questions or thoughts.
Quite a lot to digest. Maybe we just.
Thank you, we appreciate that.
Now there's a strategy to this. I gave you everything up front in the first presentation, and we give you the next budget with some of the cuts in there. So hopefully people go, oh, that's awesome.
The fact that the state is going to pilfer reserve funds is.
Well, they're not. They've talked about it. But they're not able to take what we have. But if they do legislation legally, the belief is that they could prevent us from adding more reserves to it and take the surplus funds or require us to roll it over to the next budget year.
Which is what we've done in the past, but then we end up where we are with it.
Right, when you mentioned that, I thought it was let's offset the cliff and then put, if there's anything left, the reserve fund.
You'd step it down.
Yeah, and that would be the, every year, if we've got time, you add, 100,000 to the budget, so that over the course of time, when your
Right, we don't fall.
reserve runs out, it's not a big change from year to year.
Ready? All right, so we're going to move into committee reports.
Okay, so RVTC has, this year has, at this present time, 15 more students than they had last year. There's a small, right now, there's a projected very small surplus for the current year. There's a lot of changes taking place in the spring. We're going to be looking for a new director because Scott Farr is retiring. And we also have an interim director of ETVLC, and we'll be hiring a permanent replacement for that position as well. That's
Thank you, Lois. I was out ill for TRSU, so Wayne's gonna.
Pretty much the same conversation we're having here. We discussed the TRSU budget. We talked a little bit about the environment in terms of, education funding with the commission looking at. We did, the board did vote to hire a special education teacher to assist at Cavendish Elementary.
Transportation Committee have anything to report? And then outreach and
Outreach committee met. We rolled out our October outreach items successfully. I'll throw a quick pitch in here for all the folks in the audience. If you want to stay abreast of the board goings on, but you can't make it to a Thursday meeting, we're typically on Zoom the following Tuesday. It's a good place to get a little recap about what's been going on. The other thing we've been working on is considering or trying to make some suggestions for improvements to the district's website. The beginning of that conversation was thinking about, okay, how are people accessing the websites? What are they going there to find? And what problems are they having? Without really knowing that inherently, we thought a survey was a great way to start. So with the help of Julie, we pulled together a short survey that will go out to the community. And before it does go out, I just wanted to kind of brief everyone on those questions and make sure it was all right with everyone. So I'll read it off my phone. We could screen share it, but it's like 4 questions. Seems like so. Begins with asking which school's website they're responding about, whether it's Cavendish Town, Chester Andover Elementary, or Green Mountain. First question is, how easy is it to find and access information on the school website? That's to rate 1 to 10. Second question, which of the following types of information do you use the school website to find? So number of selections, kind of just trying to get a sense of why are you going there? What are you looking for? What other information are you looking to find? Where's the first place you tend to go to find information about the district? Are people going to the websites? Are they going to local news sources? Are they going to social media? And then finally, just basically a suggestion box to see what people would want to see. So if that sounds good to everyone, it'll get officially approved and sent out during our next communications, outreach committee meeting, and we'll go from there, see what the community has to say. Sounds good.
questions, suggestions? I don't think we need a motion for you to go on that.
Cheers. I didn't think so, but I was also
No.
better safe than sorry. And thank you, Julie, to all our help.
Thank you. All right, so we're coming to our first public comment session. So I've been kind of monitoring the number of people that we've got. So we've got anywhere between 55 and 60 people. So as a group, we will decide. We can either limit this to about 30 minutes, keep it at 5 minutes per person, drop it down to 3 minutes. But if we let everyone speak at 5 minutes, plan to be here for about 5 hours. So how would you guys like to proceed? Would you like to limit the first 2 just minutes and people can talk at 5 minutes, 3 minutes? Limit it to a number of people at the beginning or in the second.
5 minutes would be shorter time that people talk, allowing more people to talk, so two
to 3 minutes per person.
More people are gonna want to talk after the next.
Yeah, that's fine. I just, like I said, I just wanted to kind of keep it in perspective. We did 5 minutes per person as we have it listed. It's gonna be a long night.
Nope.
All right. Are we in agreement with leaving it at 30 minutes for now?
Yeah.
Okay. All right, so if people in the audience want to sign up, we'll just go down the list and then Julie, can you keep, it's okay, can you keep track of who's on? And then just go in order. So we'll do the public comment here and then go into Zoom, or we can go back and forth.
That's up to you.
People have a preference back and forth, or,
Whatever's easier for you to monitor.
Yeah, there's only one hand up right now.
okay, so we'll do public here, then we'll go to Zoom. Okay, so it's 7:12 now.
Do you want them to state their
Yeah, name and town base. Okay, good. What was listed?
My name is Otis Nelson from Ludlow. This is in regards to the report that was released yesterday for Cavendish Elementary School. I was kind of surprised that it was sent out so late before, or so close to the date of when the meeting is tonight, when it could be acted on tonight, not allowing the public to have a discussion or a thought about what's going on with it. So I just wanted to let you know that we've had issues in the past in the superintendent's office with not being transparent with the people in the districts. So I just want you to carry that forward, and that's all I have to say.
Yep. Next. I don't know who signed up.
I didn't know
so
if
can
you
I
were gonna go to Zoom.
Huh?
I didn't know if you were gonna go to Zoom.
No, I'm gonna
Okay.
go through the list here and then we can.
This is a question. I was wondering if you could tell us what the general subject matter of the executive session is and which open meeting law exemption you're using for that session.
Safety and security.
What is it?
Safety and security.
Where if the public learns about it, it may cause a safety issue. Chapter 1, section 313, subsection 10.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay.
Next.
I'll sign up over there.
Yeah, yeah. Just-
Can I ask my question now? I have two questions
Well,
concerning.
I just want to be, this isn't a back and forth with the board, so this is for public comments.
Oh, okay, so I
yeah.
can't ask a question on
Not,
something on the
no,
budget?
because then it kind of prolongs things.
Okay, well,
If you want to submit the question, that's fine, and then maybe someone can get back to you.
okay, do I submit it?
Yeah, go ahead and ask the
Okay, the
question.
one
I just, we
question
can't
I
get
had
go back and forth, sorry.
Was concerning this wellness, John?
Hi, can you just tell me your name?
Oh, I'm sorry, Sandra Russo, RUSSO. Just concerning this wellness, this is quick, I'm just wondering, what percentage of the students use this program? Like, how many can come in every day, or what percentage of the overall student population uses this?
I don't have that data right to hand, but I can get that.
Okay.
John will follow up with
They
you.
do sign in and sign out, so we have that data, but it's not fully manned yet either, so, sorry.
Yeah, so John will follow up.
Okay.
Yeah, I'll follow up.
Right, and just a second one real quick about the 473,000 special assessment. That's an increase over, what causes that increase?
Lane can follow up with you. on
Okay.
that. Thank you. Okay, is there anyone else in the audience that wants to speak now? Okay, so we can go to Zoom.
I have the one hand.
Okay, so,
Wendy McDonald.
okay, Wendy?
Sorry, they're just trying to get my mic on. I just wanted to make a quick comment about the PICUS report, which a couple of people have referenced already tonight. And that's what the superintendent was saying is used largely by the Commission on Education. And it's the report on adequate education spending for our state. And it was a report done for our legislature. I just want to point out some of the faults in this report so that the school board is aware of this before we use this as our means to operate on our decisions. So I read through this report, and most of the research that it uses is from like the 1990s. And most of that research is just national averages, which means that a good deal of that information comes from areas that are urban and not really comparable to the way that Vermont is set up. And so that type of research is what we're using when we're making a statement about what sizes our schools should be, if we're having this conversation about possible reconstruction, and what might be coming forward from the state. The elementary school numbers, for example, don't say that we should have 15 in a classroom. They say that it's better to have 15 than 30. So we shouldn't be trying to make 15. We should be making smaller classes if we're looking at an elementary school level, even based on that research on the classes. The class size recommendation for like the secondary level, for example, is based on the fact that there just isn't much research available. So that PICUS report says that we should use 25 just because that is the national average. So it's questionable in terms of its efficacy for education's effectiveness, but it also is questionable in terms of its budgeting because it doesn't account for transportation, which would be a major cost if we were talking about consolidating schools. It doesn't account for local special education spending. It doesn't account for capital investment, which would be a major cost if we were consolidating schools. It doesn't account for meal services. So just before we use this type of information to make decisions about how we might or should consolidate, both as a local school board and as a state, I would really just like us to make sure that we've got research that shows that that's the result that it will give us. Thanks.
Is there anyone else? 30 minutes. And someone in the back had a question earlier. This would be the time to ask it.
Actually, someone else asked.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay. So if nobody else wants to talk during this one, we'll move on. And Lane and John will follow up. Just want to make sure that that's happened.
You can't catch me tonight, yeah.
Okay, so we're gonna move into board comments. Board comments at this time.
Yeah, I was just, I'm really excited about the US News and World Report summaries that came out that had Cavendish Town Elementary School as the second best performing school in Vermont. And I really think that report was based on exactly what I think it should be based on, which are those reading and math scores adjusted for socioeconomic status. So I think the measure itself was really good, and just want to say congratulations to the school and the teachers, and I think it's very exciting.
Yes, I agree. Thank you. Any other board comments? Okay. All right, so then we are going to move into new business, the first being the new hire for CTS interim principal.
So
Proceed.
we had a pretty strong showing from the committee that was set up to actually review the candidates and make a recommendation for the board. We started off with about four to five candidates that quickly got down to two because 2 or 3 of them were unable to even be able to find housing or consider housing in the area. So they withdrew even before, the process really got rolling. The committee almost unanimously settled on Emma Bastola, who is currently our curriculum director here at the TRSU. She's been in the district for 14 years, started off at Poly. She has multiple degrees, a bachelor's degree in social studies, a master's and a CAGS in curriculum and instruction, and is currently working on a master's and almost complete, hopefully by the summer, a master's degree in administrative leadership. She knows the community, she knows the folks, and has worked with the folks at Cavendish. And we think that she would be the best fit. So that is our recommendation to the board.
Has everyone had an opportunity to review this? Okay, are there any questions? I had a question I had asked at one point, and I have the answer, but I would like it to be shared with the board. And it was not a personal question about you, Emma, is, Emma's in her first year of this new role of curriculum director. So I just kind of want to share what the plan is to replace her.
So the team, and actually it was Emma that took the initiative on this, the administrative team got together this past week to kind of talk a little bit about, what is the vision, what do we hope to accomplish through the work, and what is the best structure for accomplishing. It has been discussed, and I think there was a pretty good consensus that having one person trying to do the work across 3 or 4 different disciplines, try to provide coaching, try to provide ideas about curriculum, the best way to teach, is probably a bit too much. And so we're looking at potentially splitting the position up a little bit, so that we can have strong focuses, especially in math, ELA, and science. No decisions have been made about what that structure will look like. On Monday, folks have asked me to come to the leadership team meeting, which also includes the teacher leaders, and have a bigger discussion about that to get their input into what that could or should look like. So it's moving along pretty quickly. We should have an answer and a step to move forward, before Emma takes over on December 1st. The other idea was that if we can find somebody, those changes would take place starting next year. If we can find somebody to potentially step into the role and carry forward everything that's in motion right now exactly the way it's been going, that would be preferable. So continue the year, try to find somebody to take over, and then next year implement any of the changes about potentially splitting the position up.
Anyone have any questions?
Can I just ask, would that be, the thinking, I know nothing is permanent, but would that be like an add to budget item, or would that be, okay?
The position she's leading has a salary.
Right,
that
but
could be
if
used
you're
for that.
thinking of turning her one position into 2 positions, are you looking at 2 full-time benefited positions, 2 part-time?
And that's what we want to talk about. I do not expect so, but we'll see what comes out of the conversation. Usually the highest performing districts typically have an individual who specializes in math, ELA, science, because they've got the skill set to not just work with folks on curriculum, taking a look at the assessment data, facilitating discussions about how to improve instruction based upon what they're seeing, but they also have something that's very important, and that's the ability to go in and coach teachers in the methods and activities that they're figuring out that they think is competitive.
Okay. Yeah. Any further questions about this? We need a motion.
Move to approve.
Second. Was that?
I second.
Okay, so the motion on the table is to approve the hiring of Emma Bastola as the CTS interim principal. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Okay. Welcome, Emma.
Ask a question. You said as an interim.
Yeah. Okay, the next is budget review, but I don't think that's necessary because we've done that, so pretty. Annual report,
If there's any discussion about following up on.
all right, and then you've already brought in teacher bargaining this year, so that was fast, okay. All right, so now we're gonna move into update on restructuring.
You want to do the B first, because that'll take like a minute.
Sure.
Actually.
All right, is everyone okay swapping those two? Sure. This one for the policy.
That'll give me a chance.
Okay. All right, so your policies were sent out. We have 3, F28, E8, F3. Everyone have an opportunity to look at those. Questions, concerns? No? Okay, this is a second read, so if I could have a motion to approve the policies as they stand. Okay. Do you want to go through them individually, or is that a blanket motion? Okay. So the motion on the table is to approve F28 wellness policy, Federal Child Nutrition Act nutrition. B8 electronic communication between employees and students, and F3 fire and emergency preparedness drills. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, they're all passed.
I think that's final 3 votes.
Hold on. Okay, so now we're on the update to the restructuring.
I don't know if would be up to the the board chair. I don't know if it's easier to have people ask questions along the way, or if it's, or
I think I'm
keep
fine.
it to public.
I'm fine with asking questions as long as we can kind of just keep it orderly and not like talking over each other. Is that okay with everybody? Or do you want the-
So the report went out. I tried to shorten up the presentation a little bit. So there'll be a lot of stuff that's on the screen that I may not talk about explicitly, but I'll talk in general about, why those ideas are important along the way. So it will be important to kind of watch what's up on the screen. Now, when we got together as an administrative team to try to come up with a fair, equitable recommendation to the board about how to manage the overpopulation at Chester Andover and the under-enrollment at Cavendish, we had really four things that we were trying to accomplish, right? And the primary one is making sure that we're enhancing the educational environment for students, right? So that they can better achieve the outcomes that the board has set as goals. We want to be able to solve the problem of over-enrollment at Chester Andover. We want to increase, if possible, the enrollment at Cavendish Town Elementary. And as a part of the process, we also want to make sure that we fully considered the concerns that have been brought up by the community over the course of time. I do want to point out that there has been significant discussion and opportunity for discussion prior to this recommendation. The board established a restructuring subcommittee in June. So there's been 5 months of board meetings and subcommittee meetings prior to it being handed over to the administrative team. At least 10 that folks could come and express their concerns or their ideas at. In terms of public and staff engagement, I held 2 open forums for the community, which were well attended, and I appreciate deeply the conversations that happen there. And we've had several listening sessions for the Green Mountain staff to be able to take their ideas and their thoughts into account. There was also data collection and analysis, and I'm not talking specifically about the survey that was done, but we were looking at enrollments. We were trying to determine where the best changes would happen to manage what we potentially see in the future, which was taken into account. And then through that process, we kind of settled on this idea that, hey, there's really only 2 solutions. You either move students or you create additional space. That's it. There's various flavors of that, but it's got to be one, the other, or a combination of the 2. And so our other goal, as much as possible, was trying to make sure that we were doing what was not going to upset the community any more than we had to. So the first and the overriding recommendation, and this one is specifically about addressing the overcrowding at Chester Andover, is construction, additional office and classroom spaces. And the 3 possibilities for that, and I'll throw some numbers up in a minute, are the idea of high quality modulars that are brought in. These are not double wide trailers. These are intended to be and can be used as permanent buildings. The benefit of them is that, if things change in the future, they can be repurposed. The other idea was one that came up from FEMA when it came in after the floods, and that was to build a detached brick and mortar building. And then the final idea, which our project management group did a little bit of work on, was adding an addition to the existing school. And the one that we're settling on at this point in time is the one that's in green, the high quality modulars. We'll talk a little bit about why that is in a few minutes. General benefits of the construction: no relocation is needed. Students stay where they are. Right? There's no disruption in their learning. They stay connected with the routines that have already been established in their home schools, as well as they have the comfort of known adults that they are working with. There is no change to bus routes. They stay the same. The biggest piece of this is the idea that 75% of the construction costs, whichever one of those 3 could be picked, is going to be reimbursed at some point in time by FEMA. And so the important thing about this is to recognize this is a reimbursement. It means we have to come up with the money up front, and then they pay us back later.
So it's 75% of any of the projects regardless. Oh, interesting. Okay. And that's in writing.
Well, if they accept we did a proposal to try to up the dollar amount that they are in the process of considering. If they accept that, it probably would cover any of the three options.
Okay.
So that's a better, yeah. Yeah, go ahead.
So the one we submitted to FEMA was about 1.4 million, and we would get up to 75% of that. Because it's 18 million, we wouldn't get all of that.
The 1.8, yeah, maybe you're not. So we'll take a look at the numbers as they come up.
Go ahead, but then I just wanted to make a quick statement.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
When do you anticipate an answer back from FEMA on whether this is a commitment?
Being a commitment's one thing, having the federal government allocate them the money so that they can follow through on it.
Yeah.
So it's
Well,
possible. to
so
divide
I was told that the money for Vermont has been allocated and it's there. While there's other funds that aren't being given out at this point. But last communication was a few weeks ago, they had asked some clarifying questions and I haven't heard back.
And the submission.
No, that's fine.
This submission was made by the school district.
Yes.
Sorry, the
No,
reason,
it's fine.
the reason bringing this up is, we were in a meeting with, Peter Welch and Rebecca Bennett, and they were talking about, FEMA payments to teachers. And, there's a lot of feeling among those who are trying to get some action. You know, the rules are changing. You know, they would like to see.
I know it's been delayed on the towns and it's affected some of the payments that we've gotten from the towns for the school district. I know we could wait a while. The hope is if they commit to a dollar amount, that they'll stick to a dollar amount.
That's my hope.
But I can't say that that's.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, it's a bureaucracy. In the meetings that I've been in there with the amount of paperwork and detail and it's massive. So things run slowly. Yeah.
So I just wanted to say, and we're doing fine so far, but as we're going through, I'd like it to be kind of just like Q&A to clarify as we're going through it, and then we'll open the floor to this for our group discussion. That way we don't get into the weeds and don't have all the information.
So if it's paid for upfront, and if we get the reimbursement at a later point in time, the reimbursement funds could be allocated to reserves so that we've got them on hand for future emergencies. Right? The boiler blows up. We got the money there. We don't have to go out to bond. We don't have to ask the taxpayers for it. It's sitting in our reserve account. Again, we kind of talked about this already. The idea that it's going to keep the students where they are, where they're familiar. It's a permanent solution, and it's going to improve significantly the learning and working conditions at Chesterfield. By getting that overcrowding out of there, making sure students have private spaces that need it to be able to work with their specialists. Again, we'll go into a little bit of detail about why this is probably the top choice. The high quality modular units, you can get them on site pretty quickly, get them up with minimal disruption to what's happening, because remember, it would be an active site in terms of learning with the students. These are designed, these are not the cheapies, these are designed as permanent structures. The nice piece is that there's some scalability with it. In other words, if our enrollment changes and we need more, it's real easy to kind of add more to the building and keep the aesthetic of the building, and it's easy to reduce if we had to sell, a chunk or a piece off.
Just students students will have to go outdoors. So boots, raincoats, all of that.
It'll be a separate building, and it would depend upon what they're using for, how much walking back and forth. Say they were using it for 5th and 6th grade, they'd be spending most of the day
In the street.
Modular units, is that 2, 3, or is that 1? For that price?
1. We'll show you. Well, there's pictures of what it potentially looked like. There was a web link in the report so people could see that it's not the cheapies that folks, and they give you inside views and outside. In terms of the cost of the 3 potential solutions in terms of construction, the modular units come in at $521,000. The brick and mortar building would come in at 1 million, a little bit more than. And the addition, if we tried to add that onto the building, would be 1.8.
The line item or estimate line item there, 5.1, is that plumbed, wired?
Yeah.
That's what that price is so elevated. That's not just the building, that's the
That's top to
slab,
bottom.
that's ADA, ramps, electrical hookup, water, sewer, the whole, that's ready to move in.
Concrete pads put it on. So this was, in looking at the breakdown, it was kind of funny. It was almost half and half. So half that cost is for the modular. The other
That's why I asked.
Yeah. I think it's but then I'll go. Just wondering about, do you have a sense of projected long-term maintenance or what these buildings need to be functional for an extended period of time?
It would be similar, right, to a normal house, normal building.
What's gonna heat these?
Whatever we decide to put in for, I mean, just, we could ask them for propane, oil. Their own standing stuff.
That's a net cost.
Correct.
Yeah.
And I see it says,
Sorry about that. I shouldn't be.
That's okay. You said it, Jeff.
does modular also mean movable? Like you said, there's an opportunity to
Scalable.
repurpose, so,
Scalable.
but could it actually be moved from one site to another?
Yeah, that's the idea of the repurposing. Yeah. So, you know, if we had to sell it because we didn't need it, or if we needed it at a different site, then we no longer have it there.
And is there space that is not in the flood plain?
Those numbers, is that after or before the FEMA contribution?
That's before. Again, we have to pay for it up front, and FEMA potentially would reimburse us after the fact at some point in time in the indefinite future.
I looked on the box site and the units look terrific. I noticed they also lease them. Did you consider a lease program at all?
No. One of the reasons being is that in looking at the enrollment trends in the district, while they jump up and down from year to year, they overall are steady. They've been that way for a little while. And so the odds are that we are going to need them for an extended amount of time. We can look at least if that's something the board wants us to do.
I'm not sure that would count toward the FEMA reimbursement.
I think Todd can clarify.
So when, this was maybe 6 months ago, Steve, when I called the guy from Box.
Yeah.
They didn't have any available. The lease was the big thing. So we priced out brand new, which was still, they'd have to produce them. They don't have them in stock because of COVID and floods. And they were just short on inventory. When I asked him his honest opinion, he didn't, they do lease them, but they are usually well used. And that was his words.
Yeah.
Well used, so I assumed they weren't in very good shape and they weren't leasing brand new units.
In the proposal, I may have been interpreting this incorrectly, but I get nervous. So in the proposal, when I was reading about the brick and mortar, there was one line that said it's safer. And I read that to mean that modulars weren't safe, and I would like you to clarify that for me.
I mean, we could make it really simple. Is it easier to go through wood, or is it easier to go through brick?
Okay, so we're not looking at an exposure risk for our students and staff. It is.
Yeah, it's just one's more easy to fortify than the other, just because of the materials. It's okay. Yeah.
Thank you.
Good questions. So recommendation 2 is this idea of, you know, we want to try to fix the enrollment, the under enrollment at Cavendish if we can. And so that's where the idea of the preschool program has come in. And the preschool program actually encompasses a whole bunch of other benefits besides just addressing enrollment issues at Cavendish. And what we'd be looking for next year is a full week program. It's full day for the 4-year-olds, and at a minimum, the 10-hour a week program for 3-year-olds in terms of taking a peek at this. I don't need to go through all these pieces, but having those programs in place provide a significant benefit to the educational outcomes of the students. They are more likely to stay in school through graduation. They're more likely to go to college. They're more likely to be successful in their careers afterwards. They are well prepared for kindergarten. They're socialized. They know how to work together with other students. And having it as a full day is going to provide some other opportunities to kind of help the parents in the area, which we'll get into in a little bit. Biggest benefit right off the top is, right, it's going to increase the enrollment at Cavendish Town Elementary. We are only planning for up to a 20 student preschool for year one, with the idea being that we want to see what we get. But we have some ideas in trying to maximize that. Some of the components of this idea would prevent future overcrowding at Chester Andover if enrollments increase there over the course of time. It's going to improve the teacher and student ratios across the district, more engaging learning environment for students. And it really is a total solution for both Cavendish as well as Chester Andover, because it is intended to be a district-wide preschool. It will serve all students in the district. So one of the ways where preschools are successful and one of the ways where they fail is in terms to the accessibility to parents. You know, from our perspective, this is great. We're giving these kids a really good start in terms of their education, making sure that they're well prepared for success down the line. But for parents, there's a dual role for them. It's the education piece, but it's also the fact that most parents work and they need a safe place for their students to be during the workday. Parents can and do not send their students to a preschool because we have vacations and we've got summer break. So during those times, they would not have that childcare piece in place for them, and they're more likely to seek out a childcare provider if they can find one within the town. And so one of the things that we would do as a part of this is this is a unique district. I didn't have any independent preschools in the previous district. I think there were like 25 or 30 that we were sending messages out to. We could collaborate with some of those local professionals and say, hey, if you're willing, we'll give you the space on our vacations and during the summer break so that the parents can continue to have year-round services. So when preschool's not in session, we've got childcare. And that would help them with their work days. And we'd be more likely to get all the preschool age students in the program that way. The biggest thing, and the board has talked about this before, is we've got about 30% of the school district that is on an IEP, that's on an education plan of some shape or form. One of the nice things about a preschool is that it provides an opportunity for early intervention. They are working with their teachers. There are often special educators there. And so we get an opportunity to actually identify any learning issues early on and can address them right then and there before they can develop over time and be significantly more costly to try to remediate down the line. If they're not caught early, if they're not picked up until a few grades later, there's a cumulative effect. If they've got gaps in learning in grade 1 and gaps in learning in grade 2, and we figure it out in grade 3, that's a lot of ground to recoup for the students. So we're better off if we can identifying them early, giving them the support they need right then and there, and then they'll be independent. They have the skills they need to be successful, and they'll never be on an IEP. Program expenses, we kind of talked about this in the budget. The staff costs would be $162,000. That's for an early education teacher and a paraprofessional. We've got the setup and equipment purchases, which is a one-time expense, about $40,000. But we also have the tuition savings because some of the students that we're paying to go out to local preschools would be coming to us instead. So the estimate is about $83,000. So the
66 million.
So the total cost would be around $118,870 to get this. And again, it would be a couple of years at the current level that we're funding for just to see what we get.
How can you do the 3-year-old program and the 4-year-old program with only one teacher?
So you can have both of them come in at the same time, and the 3-year-olds leave after their 2 hours for the day if they're there for 5 days. And the 4-year-olds remain for the remainder of the day. They overlap.
So this, I'm sorry. Go first.
Well, so that would get, okay, but that would affect the number of students.
Yeah, the ratio from the Department of Ed is 1 staff member per 10 kids. And that's one of the problems with early education is the ratio that's required in terms of.
What do you mean by full day? Are you,
Full
and
school day.
providing, okay, so you're talking 8 to 2.
Yeah.
Roughly. And so would that be consistent with like what you'd be trying to provide for summer and, summer and just vacation weeks would be 8 to 2?
Yeah, if we can get one of the groups that are in and around the community to come in and offer that service, it would be beneficial to them.
Jeff? What is it? Is there a tuition for the, like, do the parents have to pay a tuition to send their kids? So that last line I didn't.
We get partially reimbursed by the state.
Oh, okay.
Comes out of our budget.
Yeah, but the
Well,
state.
We get an ADM for that. We get a 0.43 ADM for that, and that's counted in our funding. But we pay, because they have a collaborative now, we pay $3,764 or something per student for
That
10
goes
hours
somewhere
of services. So the assumption is that the parents, if they're there for additional hours, the parents are paying the money. But if the kids are coming to us, then we don't have to pay that to anybody.
I wonder if we would consider a longer day program, 8 to 7:30 to 5, and charge a tuition. I'm just thinking about working parents, their workday doesn't end at 2.
So we've tried that. So you're talking after school programming. And again, there's a significant difference in terms of the staffing that you have to provide for kids that are under the age of 5 as opposed to kids that are older. It's costly, but it could be done. The goal would be, to make it a low enough cost that it's appealing to parents. And I don't know if the subsidies that they have now, Cheryl, would cover after school as well as preschool. Okay, so they've got significant subsidies.
It seems like that would be a wise choice because if we want to attract people.
It's the staffing is going to be more.
Sure.
Yeah.
Sure.
Oh, hold on, Katie.
Oh, it's the same with the child care subsidy does cover, and the income limits for that have increased drastically. I think it's at 575% of the poverty level. For the income guideline.
Rick?
And this is only for 20 students, is that correct, in our district?
If we go with 2 staff members.
And we currently don't provide, right? We don't run one right now.
Ludlow Mount Holly does, Green Mountain does not.
Any idea what the Ludlow Mount Holly number is? And what their
Actually,
Attendance.
and time, 7:30 to 5?
Not always
8
much
to 2.
longer than Ludlow's. Ludlow's, I think, ends at 1. And I think Mount Holly's is at 1. I think there's like 16 kids in Mount Holly and maybe 12 in Ludlow, something around
And
that.
Mount Holly does, it's a little different. So, right, 10 hours, one of the ways of doing 10 hours is 2 hours a day. Mount Holly, I believe they do the 10 hours over 2 days or 3 days a week. So the kids aren't there every day.
It's a rotating schedule. 4-year-olds attend 3 days and 3-year-olds attend 2 days. So I think at both sites.
Good questions.
So my question on that was, so we're looking at, so this 162 is for 2 staff members. I didn't know what the breakdown of that was. I know there'll be a director and then a para. Would we be just adding additional paras? So what would be for every 10 students, what would be the increase in cost?
I think, and I will double check that, but I think it's an additional for every 10. The way that it's worded is 1 adult per 10. You have to have somebody that holds the license that can oversee and direct the folks that are underneath. But up to a certain point, it should be able to be.
In addition to that, there's, with licensing, there's a space issue of how many did you have in a space.
And above a certain number, you have to have 2 sinks and the regulations.
Okay, so I guess well, the question I'm asking though is, so out of that 162, how much of that would be the director and then the para? Because with each additional para, okay, and then you just created another question for me. If the space, so what's our max?
23.
So we're not really going to be doubling it by 20. Okay.
There are additional spaces and different ways to use the available space. There are some large spaces there that are, some are utilized, some are underutilized from what I could see.
All right.
State licensing would have to come in and approve the space, correct?
Yeah, so we're putting in the application for that for the step 1 to try to get them here.
Same with the playground has to be a certain.
We talked about this a little bit before. Your current thinking is this would go in the existing kindergarten double classroom as well.
Yeah, so there's a fairly open space in the upper grade wing, way down on the end on the right. So the highest grade and the lower grade wing would go into there. Kindergarten, because it's been fairly small, would go into that space. And then the larger space that's left vacant by the kindergarten, that's what the preschool.
So conceivably, there's room to expand the program in that double classroom space without any additional construction.
Yeah,
right.
Questions on this section?
And
sorry.
So, a para would be, so I budget for 2-person health, so then 58,000, 58,500 for a para.
Salary and benefits.
Salary and benefits.
So the third recommendation is this idea of trying to prevent future overcrowding. And it's the idea that current students from Baltimore would stay where they're at. Plus, if they have siblings that come along later in time, you know, they would still be able to use that same location, that same option. But new students coming into Baltimore, coming into the district, would go to Cavendish. Currently, I think there's about 8 students total that come from Baltimore. Unless I've read the roads wrong, and I tried to drive around this time, Cavendish is closer to Baltimore. The other idea here, and this kind of goes along more with supporting student social needs, is that students that are attending the preschool at Cavendish at the end of their preschool years could petition to stay there. Sometimes, especially if you've got students that are high anxiety or they have special needs and they've gotten used to the routines and the people, which we've talked about before, it's kind of better that they stay in that location. And so that would be a recommendation as well. Obviously, there would be limitations based upon capacity. We have a process in place to be able to evaluate. And then the cost for this piece is essentially 0. That's it. Like I said, I tried to shorten it up.
So now we can kind of go into the discussion portion of this. I just want to kind of preface that I think we're doing great. Everyone's being respectful. You know, this conversation has been a long time coming. No doubt, our open discussion needs to happen. We need to be able to speak our minds freely, openly. We will probably upset someone in the audience, on Zoom, at the table, but the conversation's constant. So I just want to ask that we proceed, be open, be transparent, be respectful, but we gotta have it. So let's make the start. Casey.
First question, discussion piece is the money. Adding it up roughly $700,000 for we have the modular and preschool, right? Roughly approximately. Is the proposal to roll that into our next budget? Try to put it on the bottom budget
Budget, if we can do it without crossing the excess spending threshold. Reason being is because if we're under that, remember, other people are helping us pay for it.
Right, so that's,
And it's a one-shot deal, it's one and done. You're not having to deal with a bond for 10, 15, 20 years. And the other critical concern is what happens if we're in a bond and they change the education funding system?
right.
What does that do to our ability?
Well, my thought process was just like doing the statewide math as it exists, right? Would you say we're looking at 7% coming up, no matter what?
No matter what across
Is
the state.
projection, so I don't think there's any chance of a bond going anywhere. So if we can sneak it in under the threshold without, then maybe it's tenable. That's my thoughts.
You won't have an idea until December 1st. When it comes out. Excess spending threshold.
Right.
Yeah, so it'll be December 1st. So actually, it'll be next board meeting. We should have,
Yeah,
we might have an idea.
Once every 1 month, waited ADF, because I heard that's changed.
Just bring this up because I've heard the number 700,000 twice tonight. Is this something we could use that surplus to fund?
You'd end up, and you can
You have
answer
the
as well,
cliff.
you'd end up having the cliff.
Right.
Yeah.
But part of it, or just saying, heard 700K twice tonight. Thought it was.
Were the reserve funds just put in there, or did the town vote? Okay, because sometimes the town votes to put it for a certain use.
Okay.
And if they're not, if they weren't voted in for a certain use, yes.
Okay.
So one thing that I thought was really important that the Chester Andover staff put forward that I hadn't heard before is that it's not necessarily that there are too many students, and reducing the number of students overall isn't going to make that big of a difference, but that for these one-on-one specialized services and offices, there's a need for more space. And to me, that was really convincing in terms of other alternatives are not actually going to solve the problem. And so I am in agreement with doing it as inexpensively as is feasible and safe and healthy for the kids. But I really think that what is needed in that case is the additional office space and the one-on-one space, not necessarily just fewer students.
So
My thought.
my thoughts kind of jumping off that. The first two pieces of that proposal is adding some space to Chester to alleviate the pressure. Starting preschool at Cavendish, so there's more opportunities for the little kids and parents in the community. But then the third piece of just, again, in my mind, kind of playing three-card Monte with kids and changing where they're at isn't solving a problem. And if we're going to add space, we're going to seriously consider spending the money to add more space to Chester. Are the 8 kids from Baltimore going to really make, why are we going to upset that dynamic? Is it really going to make an impact if we just leave it alone? It doesn't make sense to me to move them to a different school. If we're going to add space to the school we're going to move them away from.
So it wouldn't impact any current students, it would impact future.
But even future, the projection.
Yeah, it would help with the enrollment levels at Cavendish. And remember, if the enrollment levels are low, you have unused resources that are sitting there that students could benefit from. And so without having enough students in there at a certain threshold, it really is, it's not taking advantage of what we have to kids, is the idea.
I can kind of speak to the Baltimore part of it. I was, pretty actually unpleased with that. I think the impact would be nominal because we fluctuate between 5 to 8 students. My concern with that is, and I can speak from a very personal experience. My kids went to Cavendish and I made that trip and it was an incredible burden. The only reason why I did it was because my youngest daughter was already installed in the school. Had we moved to Baltimore and had not already been involved with Cavendish, that would have been you know, because it's, the road is closer, but you're still going through the Gulf, which is pretty treacherous during the winter. But I guess my bigger thought on it is, and this is an opinion, we are the smallest school, like the smallest town, smallest amount of people, we make almost no noise. So I feel like we're the town that, you know, is getting moved around a little bit because we're the easiest. I don't think that taking away the parents' choice as to what school they want to go to for such a nominal improvement is gonna be well received.
And again, their recommendation.
Yeah, no,
Yeah,
that's
they're
me
not-
putting it out there. I don't really agree with that one. Whoever was first.
Yeah, so,
Sorry.
It's okay.
somewhat related, I do think that piece of of CTS of Cavendish being ranked as second in the state of Vermont for elementary schools is also motivating in terms of, I think there are families who it could work for who might therefore want their kids to go to the school where the teacher to student ratio is lower and their current performance is really exciting and great. And so I would just say, I think if we can, and I feel like in some of these conversations, we've kind of hidden that or not been willing to say, wow, the performance in that school is really great. And that doing more of that might mean that for families that it actually works well for, it's a good option rather than having it be something where we are deciding which families need to.
I absolutely agree. That's what I mean. I would like to maintain their choice. If they'd like to go to Cavendish, I'd like them to have that choice, but I don't want to say you will go to Cavendish.
So when I was reading it, my initial reaction was, if this is the first time that Baltimore has been put on the table as an option. We had several options shared months ago with the opportunity for community forums that at a very minimum, we would owe Baltimore a delay on a vote on that part of it and have a community forum in Baltimore or decide not to do it. It's just not fair it feels to me like that would be a real, just it's just a transparency issue, right? We're saying to you, we had all these ideas, you had these options to come, and now we're gonna pull the rug out from under you and make this decision to make changes to Baltimore with no notice and no opportunity for a community forum. So my request would be that we, at a minimum, table that until Baltimore has an opportunity to have a forum and talk about it, if that's a real thing you're considering.
I appreciate that. I can tell you I did reach out I didn't talk to all of the families. I did reach out to some. They're not interested. Not interested in having that choice removed. I'm not saying they're not interested in Cavendish. The thing about Baltimore, again, is we just kind of keep to ourselves. So having an open forum, I'm happy to offer that out. But for the most part, I kind of think that, we just kind of want to keep on.
And the Baltimore, the first open forum was on the table, it was discussed. Just-
Baltimore was?
Just,
Wow.
yeah, Baltimore
Oh.
and Andover.
Oh, sorry, I only
Just
recall
to
Andover.
clarify.
I was in Andover. It's not- that's Steve.
Yeah, I think on that, you raised some very good points, and I appreciate what you're saying. I think, that, we have another little piece here. We have some differences in terms of the differences between the schools, particularly if there's a preschool option. But, I think a little marketing, might be in order to say, it's not that one is necessarily better than the other, but here are the differences. And, we'd like to suggest that you consider the merits of each of these as you decide where you want to send. I think that, they're different fits. I think people would appreciate the difference between the schools. Some kids some people want a smaller scale. Some people would love to see a preschool. I think that outreach wise, that's.
I knew you'd be
something
looking at me eventually. No, I do agree, Steve. It makes a lot of sense to me.
Maybe you can correct me if I'm mistaken, but I thought one of the main reasons we were doing this was to like equalize per pupil spending and balance out the teacher to student ratio. I don't see where any of these three options change any of that. You know, the handful of kids from Baltimore that might go to Cavendish might reduce it by 1 teacher to student ratio. No, you're adding 2 staff members when you put the preschool up there, so that doesn't change anything. You're adding labor.
See?
Lane had some interesting points when we were discussing the restructuring of the classroom, of course, the last couple of months. And the idea of building a whole new school and attracting students and families was courageous and imaginative. I think this Cavendish thing sort of falls into the class of, you know, if you build it, it will come. There is a immediate plug and play character to, you get preschool kids, you have a unified school, Emma leading a dynamic curriculum, you have a great team there. I think that, you know, it will build on that. I think you're gonna get the students and you're gonna get the families to say, we like what we're seeing.
I would just add to that for me, balancing the cost per pupil is not the right goal for, again, as my opinion, that it is providing the best education and the education that each of those kids need, and that some kids cost more to educate. And that because of distances and how rural places are, it is going to continue to be uneven, and that's okay as long as the kids who we are spending less money on are still getting a great education and the opportunities that they need. So I would very much be interested in changing things or considering different proposals if the thought was the kids at Chester are not getting that. They're not getting the education that they need. But for me, just balancing the dollars themselves wouldn't be the goal.
Oh, God. Yeah, so.
Well, I was just gonna say, you know, because I always tend to be the person that, you know, pulls the elephant into the room. I think when I'm reading this, and here, this is a bigger concern in regards to our future. You know, kind of as a whole, Vermont, our population is dwindling. Like, if we build it, they will come, maybe. But I think my biggest concern looking at the state of the, you know, the education committee and what they're starting to recommend, an accelerated, you know, timeline. I think my concern is if we're going to be facing consolidation at some point, I almost want to be in charge of it, not me personally, but I want us to be in charge of what that's going to look like. I desperately worry about the sustainability of Cavendish in its size, in, you know, the cost of thing. I feel like, and you brought it up many meetings ago, Steve, that, you know, Cavendish probably would be something that they would look at because it's, you know, I mean, I think we're high 60s, low 70s for a population right now. I don't know what their threshold would be. I'm not even speculating. I'm just saying, I feel like that would be something we need to think about, is if Cavendish, you know, is not sustainable and we're looking at consolidation, and I don't know if Chester would be ready to consolidate. I don't know. I'm just, my worry is that we're going to spend anywhere between $500,000 to over $1 million to do something like this. And then in 3 to 5 years, we're looking at having to consolidate and move students.
Finish, I just want to be done.
Okay. You know, and move students, you know, to a place. So I almost want to be kind of thinking if we could, like 2 or 3 steps ahead of the state, like, okay, so you're thinking you're gonna do this to us, so we're gonna plan for this. Yeah, that's kind of what I'd like to do. I don't want this to be, creating all of these, niche things within our district. We don't have the bandwidth, we don't have the money for that. So I just want us to be as strategic as possible. So there's my elephant, Lane first.
So my thoughts here, and again, I'm not trying to sell, I'm trying to get people to think. That's the goal. Is you're looking, like I said, we're gonna be meeting tomorrow with the regional superintendent's group to talk about the fact that the state may push county schools. Don't think it'll ever fly. But if they're talking about it, something similar to that may come to fruition. If the district built a new school, a new elementary, a new high school, both, or one really good school, and design it so that it can have an addition added to it, when the decision comes of where to place that regional school district, who are they going to choose? The old building that they're going to have to renovate, that they're going to have to potentially replace, or one that's already standing and good to go. And so it might be positioning the district in the place to be the person that they choose, or the area that they choose for the regional district. So just thoughts. Again, it's not, don't know what's going to happen, but if I see a train coming, I'm going to try to warn you. Steve. Oh, sorry, Steve. My fault. I'm down.
A couple points. The situation in Chester Andover is critical. I don't think you have to do special education teachers showing up to a meeting saying we can't do our work unless they really need it. And I hear them, and I think we're at the point where we're getting to the point where we can't do a good job for those students. So we're getting to the point where it may be a violation not to provide services in a way that services these kids. So that needs to be done. Mandate to provide preschool is coming, and that will need to be done one way or the other. The other thing that I'm cognizant of is, in this U.S. News and World Reports thing, for better or worse, the college preparedness at the high school is around 40%, 6%. But I think anything we can do to provide better outcomes for our communities, whether it's earlier preschools or tutoring or whatever, is going to enhance our ultimate outcomes. We want lower grades.
All right, I guess my question I have in regards to that, and I feel like I constantly have to quantify this and like make it so that I'm not coming at it as like an attack. Do we think that if Cavendish had an increased teacher-student ratio, we would still see those numbers? I'm not accusing, I'm not saying we wouldn't. I'm just, I don't want it, I feel very sensitive to the fact that it seems like as a board, we're kind of saying this, like Cavendish is superior, but I don't feel like we're comparing apples and oranges. And I don't think it's a fair comparison. So I don't know what that would look like. If Cavendish had an equal ratio, would they still be demonstrating scores? And I mean, I don't mean that in a disrespectful way. I'm just trying to be as like thoughtful about this as possible.
Yeah, they've had right-sized classrooms of 20 and 25 students for years, and they've always done. I don't know if that's the answer to your question. I'd like to see bigger classes. They are proven to be better environments for learning. So that's another reason.
Other thoughts, questions, Casey?
Just kind of my closing thoughts on this as far as we've gone with it is that, again, bullets 1 and 2, as far as, do they make sense? In my mind, yes, they do, in a lot of ways. But the big question that we can't answer until we have financials is this financially feasible? Because we do have to do this in a fiscally responsible way. Another 7% hit is bad. If we can do this in a way where we're not impacting it negatively at a local level, then it sounds great. But I don't want to be a part of any more financial bloodletting if we're not, you know, we need to be responsible about that.
I agree.
So to that point, does it make sense to defer a decision on this until it sounds like we might get some information on budget in December? You have a big meeting that is going to be talking a lot about strategy, what tomorrow? Does it make sense to mull this over for the next month, see what comes out of that in terms of strategy, see what we have for numbers, and then make the decision in December?
And let the public.
And let the public mull over
Yeah.
it, give us their opinions?
I don't see how we could vote without financials.
Exactly.
Yeah, I agree. I don't see how we could vote without hearing what the public has to, thinks of this also. I mean,
I'm fine with- So is the board in agreement to put this off until next month's meeting?
Yes.
I mean, it's been long enough. We might as well keep another month here.
Question I have for Cheryl, is to double check about the 700,000 that we have. Is some of that or all of that available to use with this?
So, yes.
Okay.
It has not been, we would have, if we don't put it in our budget, we have to go to the voters, ask what to do with it. Get their permission to move it into something else. And we have not done that, so it is available, but it's a process to think through. It has to see how it's going to impact.
Yeah.
Like where you put it. Because of the clip, if the money, if we put it into, just into the budget, then the next year, well, hopefully that, so. Whatever. But we'd have to look at some options on that.
That's why I'm asking, to make sure that you get ask the questions wherever, however you have to ask the questions.
Budget would reduce all that.
2 hands up, 3 hands up.
Who was first?
I was
Okay.
So I don't need an answer tonight, and it would just be really helpful for me. I don't know what you mean by the clip. Like you guys have used the word clip, sounds terrible. Really don't have an answer tonight. But if we're making a decision and voting next month, I would love to know what that clip actually means. Yeah.
Do you mean, are you asking for the number or what the word clip?
Well, I
What-
know what
that's
an
just
actual
what-
clip
no,
is.
wait.
It sounds terrible, but I don't understand. I think that's
Yeah,
the
I
answer.
can, after the meeting,
Okay.
give me 30 seconds.
Great, thank you.
Okay,
I don't
who's
want
next? Todd?
So when you're home mulling all this over, I think we really, part of your thought process should be that when we're talking about a modular, when we use that word modular, it's not connected to the building. We won't have as good air quality as those brand new air handlers that we put in at Chester Andover. There is an option to put a brick and mortar addition on the other end of the building. It is more money. It would be more aesthetically pleasing, and it would be, I think it would probably be more conducive to learning, although it is more money. But I really think we need to give that some thought and not, if we're looking at a long-term addition to our schools, I don't think that we always have to be financially aware of what we're doing. But just because it's cheaper doesn't mean it's always the best route to go.
Which end of the building are you talking about?
Beyond the playground end, on the east end.
Can I ask one? So my question to you would be the timing of putting on this addition and how that would affect the education that was.
From talking to the engineers way back when the flood first happened, they felt that there would be no disruption to school by putting an addition on any project. They could do it. I mean, obviously, there's gonna be some disruption, but no closing of classrooms or.
Thank you.
And the heater, in the boilers at Chester Andover, because there's 3, they're all very new, could handle an 1800. Addition.
You think we should take a straw poll to make sure all 11 of us are gonna have at least one thing we're gonna vote for? Because if there's 6 of us that don't like any of the 3 options, then we're gonna be down a whole month without sending it back to the committee.
Yeah, I was, once everyone got through their questions, I was gonna try and get some sort of summary, if there's anything we want to kick back to the administrative team and say, no-go, you didn't answer this. Like, I'd like to kind of give them something to be thinking about working on. And then I also want to make sure that we're clear on what we're thinking about, so that everyone doesn't leave here kind of with their own individual ideas and we come back and repeat this next month. So I think, maybe once everyone's got their questions as a group, we can do that. Would that work for you?
I'm just throwing it out.
Yeah, no, I think we need to be focused and have goals. Scott, and then you, Rick.
Why does it have to be modular or brick and mortar? Why can't it be something else?
Like, what would be the other?
Yeah, metal buildings, you can do timber frame, you can do all kinds of stuff that
Yeah, so
look
the-
pleasing too. that
When we
aren't
say
gonna
brick
cost
and mortar, it's just because that's what the engineers put together was like an addition onto the school or a brick and mortar building, cinder block, like this school built out of, Chester and out behind, the school.
I feel like
And the modular was it was just steel built, Scott. That was just, it wasn't a choice, it was just, they're out of Maine and that was just what they were doing.
Didn't you get some numbers at one time? Didn't you have Record Concrete come in and give us some numbers on an addition? And that
Yeah.
wasn't brick and mortar.
No, yes, it was. Yeah.
Next question is footprint for each school. Acreage. What do we have for CAES? What do we have for Green Mountain?
100 something here.
Green Mountain, there's 168 acres here. Chester Andover, I'm not sure on the total acres at Chester Andover. The problem at Chester Andover, when you talk about construction, is a lot of it is in the floodway and in the flood zone.
Well, that's why I'm asking the question for everybody to hear. What do we have at Green Mountain?
168
acres.
Yep.
And 10 or less at CAES?
Guessing, right?
Give me a minute, I'll find it.
Okay, I'm just asking.
Is there an answer for CTES?
Jane, I think.
So about
15.
15 acres.
A lot of it straight up, yeah.
So less than.
Good for slides.
Chester is
Great for sliding.
8.53.
8.53
Yep.
usable or just 8.53 total?
8.53 is what it
Okay.
says. Okay. Thank you.
Okay. Does anybody else have any other questions or statements before we kind of start to summarize this a little bit?
Well, I'd just like to commend Clayton for giving us like a solid report with 3 solid options that seem well thought out with like preliminary financial thoughts. This really feels like what this discussion was lacking.
I agree. Thank you.
Really appreciate it. And
I like where this is going, thank you. I'm curious about Scott's comment, and I know Rick always has ideas about construction and building. I'm wondering if it would be prudent to get some other estimates on what to be done on that side.
I agree.
Estimates for
We're an 1,800 square foot space, that's what we want.
1,800.
Isn't
That's
that
what you're
what we're
saying,
talking
right? About 2,000.
200,000.
And is that because you're looking for less expensive options, or I'm guessing you're not looking for more? expensive options?
Just compare. I mean, if you're gonna do some sort of construction, shouldn't you have all the answers instead of just 2?
Well, ultimately, we would have to go out, if this is the direction you decide to go, we would have to go out to bid.
Including for a modular. Even if there's.
40, yeah, anything over 40,000.
Yeah.
So we want to make sure, right, these aren't numbers that we put together, these particular numbers, Scott, that we put together
I know.
to present to you for an addition, it was for FEMA, right? That's how all of this first part got started, so we're presenting just numbers that we presented to FEMA, not numbers that were,
I'm just looking out for taxpayers' money.
no, we have been doing, I mean, it's a project, right? It's,
I have
Yeah.
a question about the acreage for Chester Andover and how much of that acreage is in the flood.
I couldn't tell you that. Onyx doesn't tell me that part.
Todd, is that something that you might be able to bring back?
What's that?
How much of the Cavendish acreage?
Not Cavendish, how much of
I'm
the
sorry,
Chester and
acreage is
over
in floodplain?
acreage is in the flood?
I can bring that back, but it's a lot. But the spaces to build are very, very limited at Chester.
The state of Vermont has a website that you can get up. My wife can do it. She's a realtor. I can tell you exactly where you can build and
Lisa?
With any of these options, do we know how they will affect the insurance?
Call Bisbit.
Knock down.
So I mean, we just had the big increase in insurance. And now if we're building on it, I'm assuming that will be more in insurance.
But you lost a building that was in a floodplain, I would think that would be really expensive to insure. And you'd be
But now
building,
it's gone.
but you'd be building a building in,
can't build a building in floodplain.
well, no, on not a floodplain, so you would think that the insurance would probably be more reasonable.
We shouldn't be paying flood insurance. We're not in.
No, we
flood.
won't. We have the square footage that we've already created. Especially have the same square footage.
Yeah, that's good.
Okay, are there any projections about floodplain changing? There's a lot of changes happening in the world in terms of climate.
It's only getting worse.
I just wonder if there's any predictions about things changing. My house has been there for 200 years, and I got water. Things are changing.
So from the folks that we've been talking to, as a scientist, they need more data. I'm sure it is, but to be able to quantify how much per year or, the encroachment would be take a little bit more data than they would have at this point in time. Sure.
Okay, all right, so I think we all kind of have a good idea of, what the three options were. We sort of expressed our opinions, our thoughts, and asked the questions that are thought of right now. When we come back next month, the goal will be to get answers, the goal will be to vote. I mean, I'd like us to have a goal so that we don't show up not knowing what we're doing. And then based on this, were your questions answered? Were your thoughts? I just want to make sure that, we go back to the administrative team and say, we need these things answered, or, I'm not saying this personally, like option number 2 did not meet what I was looking for. Is there anything that we want to send back as a board? I'm not looking specifically for just an individual, but as a board, do we want to take these 3 and vote on these 3, or is there something more we want?
I would just say remove the one where Baltimore.
Second.
Well, I don't think we need a motion right now. So we want to just focus on the first 2 options. Is that what I just heard?
Yep. Yes.
Okay.
So I'm just wondering, procedurally, that sounds like a no vote on the third option, which.
Well, we're not really voting.
Okay.
So we're kind of like narrowing down the scope of what we want to be looking at. These are just recommendations. It's not a presentation like you have to say yes or no. And as a board, if we're saying, we don't really like that, take it off the table, then we can focus on the other 2. I don't really think we need to take a vote per se on that, unless you guys want to. Whoever, Steve.
I think we need more input from the community. And at this point, I think it's reasonable to make a motion to table the discussion until we actually hear from people that this has been presented to today, and find out what their reaction.
Oh, I think we'll get that over the month. I got it.
We're gonna get that.
I think we are currently tabling all of the recommendations until next month. So we don't need to say we're tabling the Baltimore part. If we took a vote on Baltimore, it wouldn't come back on the table. It can, without taking a vote right now, it can come back on the table next week. I think that's my interpretation of why it would make sense to make a vote, to have a vote on that part of it.
Does the board want to take a vote to remove that option?
I'm okay with it.
Okay with that? Okay. All right, so would someone make a motion?
I'll move to remove,
Second.
Okay, all in favor of removing option recommendation number 3?
Yes.
Removing recommendation number 3? Aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
No.
No, no, I mean, because it was a no vote, you're good with.
Yeah.
It was just Steve, okay. Okay, all right, so
So
the ayes.
back to your question.
I just have to finish it. So the ayes have it, so recommendation number 3 is off the table. Lisa.
And then back to your question about what does the board need to be able to vote next time? I would say it's the financial information. So what would each of these pieces individually and together look like in the budget? Is that,
In terms of tax impact, or if possible?
if we have that, yes.
I don't know if I have that in.
Yeah.
Will the December 1st letter give you?
With the understanding that these will be estimates, not exact numbers.
Did we want to leave it with just the 2, or do we want to, maybe there was a runner-up option you guys had, Lane, on the committee that didn't make the top 3? You want to use
That was new building.
New building.
Oh, the new
Like,
building.
yeah, make it new.
Like a new building.
Get rid of the old, one big beautiful new one.
Do you guys want that on the table? Nope. Okay.
Too much green.
Okay, so everyone's clear, the 2 recommendations that will be revisited with financial information and public input for next month will be recommendation 1 and 2.
Yes.
Okay. And again, I don't know if you guys read all this, the recommendations are not all, it can be parts and pieces of them, so just please take the time to talk about it. Okay, is there anything else? Okay, I think we can move that up. Good job, everybody.
Hey, thank you.
All right, so the next option the next item is future agenda items. Obviously, we're gonna have the restructuring revisited. Okay, so we'll keep budget, all right, we'll keep restructuring and old business. Is there anything that anyone wants added? So we are gonna go into our next public comment. Is anyone from the gallery want to speak now?
Well, you kind of rule mine out when you eliminate the last decision.
No, so I'm happy to have people, I just kind of want to I'm just trying to gauge how many people are gonna want to speak. Is there anyone with their hands up in Zoom? We have 2 in the gallery. We got
Wendy
hands.
McDonald.
Maybe.
Somebody sent me a message, I don't.
Okay, so I see.
Oh, and Wendy, yes.
So we have 2,
Abe.
3, 4, okay, so 4 people, so why don't we do in-house and then we'll go to 2 on Zoom, and we can do the 5 minutes if you want, because there's only 4.
I just,
Yes, you do.
Yeah, actually, you have 3 on Zoom.
I mean, I'm glad that you eliminated the third option. What I needed to come and say is, I worked 1.5 years on the merger. I was the person that was represented in Baltimore. So I felt very strong that I needed to come tonight to say that, we took 1.5 years, and when we submitted the community report for approval through the state, and Act 15 was something that made very clear that we would want to keep it a choice for the elementary school. So that was stated right in the articles. So I was really frustrated to think that all the work that we did 1.5 years, and it was going to be thrown out the window, and we weren't going to take into consideration the articles that we wrote. So I'm glad that that was taken off the board, because that would have been really, we spent a lot of time, and like you said, Baltimore is very much to themselves, so not a lot of people come out and talk. They just go with it and hope that the people that are representing them will make the right choices. That's what I have to say.
Thank you. I'm sorry, did you get her name?
Oh, I'm sorry, Kathy mute there. Yeah. I was here a lot.
Randy Miles from Chester. I want to thank everybody for this topic because I know there's a lot going into it in so many different directions. And it's a tough one, but we're all acting good. My biggest thing, and I'm glad some of you mentioned it, is being aware of the taxpayers. What I'm getting out of this tonight is I see more and more teachers and positions being added. I see our budget growing out of control. We know what the state is going to do. They are going to increase those classroom sizes. They have no other option but to do that. You know, they're talking about it, but I know they're going to increase from where we are now. So we have to look at that. And I think being proactive is a solid thing to be looking at. Let's take control of this and be in charge and try and do the best we can before something is put down upon us that we don't have any say or any time to deal with. I don't know where the classroom sizes are on all 3 different schools at this point in time, but I think they do have room to grow. And that's really all I have to say now. I applaud you all for being polite and courteous, and you have other ways to go, and I hope it all stays that way.
Thanks, Randy. Okay, so now I don't know who was on Zoom first.
I would say Sarah Sol.
Okay. Sarah?
You'll unmute her.
Yeah, let me see, mute herself.
I can ask her to unmute.
She's trying.
We can ask her to.
She's trying.
You get that, but.
Do we want to go to the next person while
Yeah,
she's
the
trying to
next hand
unmute?
up was Wendy. I'll work on Sarah here.
Okay, so next is Wendy.
Okay, just 2 quick pieces. The first is that I'm just a little bit confused about what just happened with the third option with Baltimore. I had the impression we weren't voting on any of the pieces. So did we just vote on the Baltimore piece without receiving comment about that? I don't know or have a preference about what happens in Baltimore. But without much discussion, it seems like that's off the table, and I don't exactly know why. Then the second piece is just, I've heard this comment a few times that the state may come in and force us to do something. And so therefore we should do something first. I'm really worried with this perspective that we're do something first, and then the state is going to come in and tell us what we actually should have done, and we're going to do it all. So I would advise everyone to not try to circumvent the requirements that we might predict might be coming in this very volatile education environment right now, and actually do what we think might be necessary rather than having it all redone on us later.
Thank you. Was Sarah able to be unmuted?
She's working on it. So, how do you go to Abe?
Go to Abe and then try Sarah again.
Going to me?
Yep.
All right. So first couple things. When you talk about the cost difference between Chester Andover and Cavendish Town Elementary, you talk about it as per pupil, but that is decidedly apples to oranges. You have to look at the cost per equalized pupil. And if you don't do that, all of your comparisons are disingenuous. The second thing, it is deeply offensive to say that the Gulf is a hazardous road that we shouldn't send kids through, when Cavendish has been sending its high school drivers through for 40 years. We have children in the graveyard who went through that road. And so to say, oh, we can't have adults, experienced drivers drive their elementary school kids, we can't have school bus drivers drive on that road, is deeply offensive. Now, having said those criticisms, I really appreciate the proposal. I think the special education staff from Chester who spoke about their needs were very clear. They need more space in that building. I agree with Todd. I think a brick and mortar addition is going to serve us more long-term, be better, be better in terms of the educational thing. However, I also think that Cavendish is going to need a brick and mortar addition or modification in order to have an adequate preschool space. The ratios that Lane was talking about for 1 for 10, those are the state educational ratios for 4-year-olds. National Association of Education for the Young Children, which is the other accreditation piece, has different ratios for 3-year-olds and for 4-year-olds. And depending on if you've got 20 or you've got 16, there are different rules for different ages. And there's a space issue as well. You can't put 20 3-year-olds in the same space you can put 20 12-year-olds. Just think about what that would look like. You have a space issue, you have a sink issue, you have a bathroom issue. One of the differences between Chester Andover and Cavendish, Cavendish has 2 bathrooms for all the grades except for kindergarten. And there are 3 toilets in each bathroom. That's it. If you, the kindergarten room has dedicated 2 bathrooms. So if you're going to have a preschool, you're going to have more bathrooms. There are some ways to do it. You could steal the bathroom from the library and put an additional bathroom on the outside of the library if you change the first grade room into a kindergarten room. But we're talking about a serious capital investment. I would expect it to be at least half as much as what you're expecting to spend in Chester Andover. Now, having said that, I think it's a reasonable expectation to have a preschool in our district, just like we have a preschool in Ludlow, Mount Holly. But you need to have, I think, a little bit more of an evaluation by an early childhood educator. Dale was a principal and he was an elementary educator, but he was not an early childhood educator. He would not be qualified to teach a preschool. You need someone who is qualified to teach a preschool to be evaluating the program before it gets started. You're going to have issues getting accreditation if you don't do that. I think it's possible. Like I said, I think that for the school that's a big thing. If only there was some way that we could remove a 10, 15, $20 million albatross that's sort of looming out there that maybe needs a new boiler, that would then justify spending a significant chunk of money to improve the elementary school and improve the preschool options. That might be the way to make everybody happy in terms of educational outcomes and also in terms of fiscal responsibility.
Thank you. Were we able to get Sarah unmuted?
I think she dropped off to try to rejoin, but haven't yet.
Is there anyone else that wants to speak while we're waiting to see if she? Is anybody else online? Okay. All right. So we'll move on then. Okay, so that's public. So yeah. Oh, so next we're going to move into executive session.
I move to enter executive session on Title 1, Section 15.
I'm sorry, we're getting up in the
I move to enter executive session under Title 1, Section 313, subsection 10, i.e. security, response, and disclosure of which.
Second.
Okay, all in favor of moving to executive session? Opposed? Okay, we are now in executive session.